UKGBC has a mission to radically improve the sustainability of the built environment by mitigating against and adapting to climate change. The UK urgently needs to decarbonise its built environment, which influences 42% and has direct control over 25% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. At COP26, UKGBC launched the Whole Life Carbon Roadmap, a common vision and agreed actions for achieving net zero carbon in the construction, operation and demolition of buildings and infrastructure in the UK. This includes a science-based carbon trajectory to achieve net zero carbon by 2050, and 5 key priorities which government and industry need to support and implement across the sector in order to deliver net zero for the built environment. One of the key priorities is whole-life carbon measurements and agreed limits. The roadmap considers built environment emissions from both the embodied and operational carbon associated with domestic and non-domestic buildings, as well as infrastructure. Operational carbon consists of the emissions associated with the in-use operation of a building, including all energy consumed. Embodied carbon consists of the emissions associated with materials and construction processes throughout the whole life cycle of a building or infrastructure. This includes the use stage embodied carbon required for maintenance, repair and replacement, as well as emissions associated with the demolition, deconstruction or disassembly of buildings. There are balances and trade-offs between operational and embodied carbon. For example, a highly efficient fabric-first approach may require more materials, therefore more embodied carbon at the outset, but then use less energy in operation. To get a complete picture of the carbon emissions which a building may be responsible for throughout its life, we need to measure its whole-life carbon emissions. Operational carbon is increasingly regulated as there is growing awareness of the need for energy efficiency. However, embodied carbon is currently unregulated, yet it can account for almost 70% of the total carbon emissions across a building's whole life. The roadmap recommends implementing a regulatory policy framework for embodied carbon in new buildings, with clear signposting of a phased pathway. This starts with mandatory measurement and disclosure of upfront carbon being introduced into building regulations at the earliest opportunity, followed by the phased introduction of embodied carbon limits for new buildings to reduce demand, alongside changes to planning and VAT to incentivise the reuse of existing buildings. Solving this is both a demand and a supply issue, requiring more efficient design and optimised material choices from buildings designers, in tandem with supply chain decarbonisation via industrial strategies and carbon pricing policies. Redevelopment of the existing UK building stock should be the priority, implementing a retrofit-first strategy before considering a new construction where new buildings are necessary. These should identify opportunities to reuse materials, particularly for structural elements, as well as designing for flexibility and disassembly to avoid the need for future retrofit and maximising circularity at end of life. Whole life carbon measurement demonstrates the value of these initiatives in reducing overall carbon emissions, while agreed limits advances best practice and innovation and ensures that we take a strategic approach to the decarbonisation of our built environment. Whilst whole life carbon measurements and agreed limits is a critical component to focus on, there are 4 other key priority areas which should be tackled. Look out for our other videos exploring each of these additional key priorities in more detail. To find out more about the roadmap, please visit our website.